8:10 on this Friday. New developments this week in the murder trial of a former Mesa police officer accused of shooting and killing an unarmed man at a hotel last year. A retired sergeant with Mesa Police who responded to the 911 call about a rifle at the La Quinta Inn took the stand, backing up former Mesa officer Mitch Brailsford's decision to shoot Daniel Shaver even though he was unarmed.
Okay, so that retired sergeant, Charles Langley, was also on scene. He testified that had Brailsford not been in his direct line of fire, he too would have fired his weapon at Daniel Shaver that night. Langley said Shaver was not cooperating with officer commands and made a reach toward his back after he was told numerous times to keep his hands in the air.
That definitely raised my attention level. I mean, the flags went up for me.
And why is that?
Because at that point, I figured, was he checking for a weapon? Was he testing us? You know, there was no reason for him to make that movement.
Mitch Brailsford is charged of second-degree murder and could face more than a decade behind bars if he were to be convicted. The case is recessed until after Thanksgiving. Joining us this morning to take a look back and also what's next is criminal defense attorney Jason Lamm. And I know you've been communicating with the team here as well.
Yeah, this is getting really interesting. But guys, we have officers saying, yes, I would have taken the shot. We have other officers that say, no, I wouldn't have taken the shot. This is almost like a blue-on-blue fight, but on the witness stand. And at the end of the day, it's going to come down to one witness and one witness only, Mitch Brailsford. And we'll see that probably after Thanksgiving when the defense starts its
Do you
case.
think he will take the stand? I know
Scott,
he's on the list, right?
I think he has to take the stand, and here's why. Under Arizona law, once the defense raises the idea of self-defense, it's the state's obligation to say that it didn't happen beyond a reasonable doubt. In other words, the state is going to have to prove that Brailsford didn't act reasonably. And, you know, we can look at, you know, the situation through the perspective of other people. We're going to hear from use of force experts in the defense case. But at least to me, it really doesn't matter. What did Brailsford feel at the time? And did the jury think, or will the jury think, that his actions were reasonable?
There was some conversations about what may have been redacted or sort of left out intentionally from the officer reports. Is that relevant?
I think at the end of the day, Olivia, it's white noise. I think what you're referring to is an internal investigator for the Mesa Police Department noticed that 5 separate officers omitted from their report that Mr. Shaver said, you know, don't shoot, don't shoot.
And was crying.
And was crying.
That seems pretty big.
It is, but Scott, I actually instruct law enforcement and have for many years. And one of the things we always talk about is that police reports are merely summaries of what occurred. It doesn't necessarily include every detail, every fact. And in this case, we had the body camera video. I think, like I said, it's going to be white noise. At the end of the day, what the officers did do, what they didn't do, what they wrote, you know, what they didn't write, it doesn't matter. It's going to come down to the eyes of Mitch Brailsford and how he comes across on that jury
Well,
stand.
that's the other thing, right? I mean, he has to be relatable. And does he have to be remorseful, even though, can he say, I would make that choice again because in that moment, what I believe to be true, but also show remorse? I mean, that seems to be a tricky position.
I think for him to come off likable and sincere to a jury, I think he can and he has to. Now, I have a trial coming up myself very soon, and it's a self-defense case, and I hope the prosecutor's not listening. But, you know, my client will say, yeah, I feel really bad about what happened, but I absolutely had no choice whatsoever to act the way I did.
Do you think other police departments are really paying close attention to this and what happens?
I think they are, and I have to think that law enforcement is very skeptical and leery of the county attorney's office because, you know, as first responders, they're going out there, they're doing their job, they're putting their lives on the line, and they're making split-second decisions. And in the back of every police officer out there, they've got to be saying, hey, if I do my job and someone second guesses this, am I going to be facing the rest of my life in prison?
Right.
And I think you're going to see a lot of veteran officers hang it up, and I think you're also going to see a lot of people who want to get into law enforcement saying to themselves, I'm not so sure.
Yeah, I mean, these repercussions to be second-guessed in that way, I mean, that could result in an officer being injured because they take too long of a moment to assess the situation when they need to protect themselves.
A split second or two could mean everything.
It's life or death.
Absolutely, in a life or death situation. So if the officer hesitates, you know, with a finger on the trigger, do I donate? Next thing they know, we can have some real serious casualties, if not a loss of life. And they have to go on training and instinct. And I think a message is being sent to law enforcement, at least in this case, that you can act, but we're going to second guess you, and it could have some really catastrophic consequences going forward. So a lot of implications in this case, guys, not just what we're seeing on the witness stand, but a lot of things to come. And do you want a prediction?
Yes.
I think this is a very tough case for the county attorney. I think we as a community support our police officers. I don't want to jinx anything, but I think it could be a hung jury or a not guilty.
Really?
We'll see. We'll
Okay.
be here, especially when Brailsford takes the stand.
Yes.
And we'll see if I'm right or if I'm buying you guys lunch.
And by the way,
Thank
if
you,
it is a
Jason.
hung jury and no decision, is that something they'll just let it go, or would they? Is this going to be one of those deals where they try to retry it again?
Well, they absolutely have the right to retry the case, Scott, under Arizona law. If you remember Richard Chrisman, the police officer who was on trial for murder a few years ago, there was a hung jury. In his case, he ended up pleading guilty to a lesser charge. That's one of many possibilities, but I think we have to focus on the trial first, see what the jury says, and we'll take it from there.
Okay.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you, Jason.